Now, staying on the RNS tab, we're going to look at what we call selection ratios or yield ratios. And they're really important numbers to have because they show you the percentage of people that you attracted through recruitment, what percentage of them make it through uh, different steps of the selection process through to job offer and hire. And when you keep track of these percentages, it gives you an indication of two things. One is how good are your selection procedures, like your screening, your employment tests, your interviews, and so on. And also, how good are the candidates coming in? So, of course, if you had 100 applications coming in and all 100 made it to become a candidate and all 100 were good enough to offer a job to, well, that is fantastic. You're attracting and sort of recruiting the best out of the best people, but that's not always the case. And for each job and for different sources or even by location or different type of job, if you broke that down, it gives you a really good indication about the effectiveness or optimized value of your activity. So let's have a look. If you look at all of these candidates, one line each, we know where they came from, which school or which agency they came from, right? And then there's several steps that they had to undergo through selection: initial screening, employment tests, and that employment test might be a combination of more than one test, and we would just score it together. Manager interview, 1, 2, background checks, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in each step here, and we're going to write the number down. Now, I kind of remember how many applicants we got in, but I'll just do it in front of you again. I'll just highlight. We're going to do security first. So we had 46 people come in, right? Let me just go back and forth. So 46 people came in. That's 100% of people, correct? Now, how many of them made it through initial screening? Well, all of them had initial screens done, so 46, but 4 of them, if you remember, the zeros, see, we counted the zeros, they did not make it through. So that was 42. Now, how many of the 46 made it through employment tests? Which means, now you got to look at it two ways. How many were given employment tests? So let's take a look. I'm just going to highlight these. Okay, so we had 29, but out of that, one person scored a 0. Now, 0 on an employment test means an absolute no-show or whatever it might be. So in effect, we didn't do it. So it'll be a 0 minus that. So 29 minus 1 is 28. 28 people passed through or made it through to the employment test stage. Now, the other way to look at it is how many people passed a cutoff score. So even in initial screening, I'm counting everybody we screened. But if your cutoff score was, let's say, 70, and you want to minus all the people that were below 70, that's also a practice. Just make sure that that is documented and you do it time after time exactly the same way. So in order to automate that, when you're looking at cutoff scores instead of just everybody, what you can do is use the COUNTIF function, and you would recall that from a previous course. If not, please refer to your Excel notes. So we can use a function called COUNTIF bracket, and then let's just highlight all the numbers we're counting, in this case the initial screening scores for the security guard applicants. Okay, so we're not just looking at everybody, we're looking at only people who are greater than or equal to, and let's set a cutoff score of, let's say, 75. Okay, so if you're 75 or more, I want to know how many of you made it through to the initial screening score stage. So let's press enter, and I'm getting 21. So 21 people effectively made it through to initial screen score. Now that, of course, changes your percentage. So that would be 21 divided by 46, and you're getting about 45%, 46% of a ratio, and that's not bad actually. It's not as good as 90% that we had with just everybody, but it gives you a good indicator, because who is it you're counting now? Your cutoff score is sufficiently high, it's robust enough, 75, that these are like the really good people out of all the people that applied. In fact, you can make a job offer to all of these people just based on their qualifications and work history. But of course, we're going to do the other parts of the selection process to get the best out of the best from this group. The employment test scores, right? I'm just including all of them. Now, how many people made it through manager interview? So remember, how many people did we give the interview to? So we're going to include the people that even failed, right? So that would be 18 people. 18 people out of 46 made it there. How many had manager interview to? Okay, there we go. We have 9. So 9 people made it through this stage. And of those people, how many did we perform background checks on? So let's take a look. Now we're going to look at this a different way. So that's also 9 people, but we're not going to include the ends. Okay, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. So it'll be 5 people. Now, let's do some percentages. Okay, that's 100% of your applications in. Well, let's do 42 divided by 46. And I'll just make this into a percentage, okay? Like that, I think we'll do 1 decimal place. 91% of your applicants made it through initial screening. And that's a bare minimum, the basic, right? Remember, if you use the cutoffs, anybody over 70, that gives you a different number. So 91% made it through total, but if you only look at all the 70s, or higher, or whatever your cutoff is, that might give you a different result. And I think you remember how to do that. You can just put it in pivots, just look at everything that's above 70, right? Now, how many of those made it through employment tests? Well, 28 out of 46. 60%. How many through the next stage? 18 out of 46. 9 out of 46. And the last one is 5 out of 46, 10.9%. So that's not bad. And the way I look at it is that you've done recruitment properly. You've attracted not just anybody out there with no qualifications. You attracted around 90% of people who had at least some minimal qualification. They might not have scored high, but at least they had their basic minimum, right? That's pretty good. You're attracting the right people at the right place at the right time. You're getting into the minds of the people where they are at. Or your company just has a culture and a brand that people are attracted to. Out of that 60.9% or 60% made it through employment tests, 39 or 40% interview 1. That's pretty healthy. Pretty healthy. You're giving your managers a lot to choose from. And then roughly half of that, 19%, to the next stage, which means 1 out of 5 people that applied, you're in fact deeming to be good and satisfactory. But then by the time we get to the job offer process, we're down to about 10. And in my opinion, just looking at general benchmarks in the hospital setting, 1 out of 10 people that you can actually make a credible offer to is pretty darn good. Now, of course, you're not going to make an offer to all 5 people. You're going to make an offer to 1, but have 2 more on hold. But that's a pretty darn good ratio, I'll tell you, because if your ratios are very low going through the selection stages, it indicates that just the quality of the people you're recruiting is really, really bad. Or your selection process, in fact, actually needs work. But keeping these numbers by job that you're looking at, and then over a period of time, gives you a really good understanding of, well, what's acceptable to me? Where should I be in terms of a number? Okay. Now, also keep in mind, you might work for an industry that might be distant or dangerous job or bad reputation, where you're going to attract very few people, right? And that just means you have to compensate people to do jobs that they don't necessarily want to do.